Good morning. This is Rosemary with Good Journeys Tarot, and today I am doing the video for the hashtag cards that don't work for me. I believe I've talked about some of these cards before when I did walkthroughs of the various decks, but this week, as I was working with the Green Witch Tarot, I was just caught again by cards that surprised me or make me think harder about their meaning because they just don't quite fit. Sometimes it's just a matter of not understanding the imagery that the artist chose for the card. And other times it is because the artwork is just aesthetically not appealing to me. And yet other times I feel like there is some confusion within the deck itself, where two cards seemingly have swapped meaning or significance because of what is on them. So today we're going to take a quick look at that. We're using this portable reading space that I created. There's a little heart over here, and then there is my rose logo over here. I also put some color on it just because I'm hiding some things. Yeah, so let's get started. The first card is from the Slow Tarot. This is the King of Wands. This card to me is completely different than every other card in the deck of the Slow Tarot, because most of the cards within the Slow Tarot to me maintain a certain degree of realism in everyday life, whereas this one seems to jump the shark, so to speak. There is that little bit of mystical, magical thing going on with the fire coming from the brain and whatnot. This is also a card I've struggled with aesthetically. I can't quite figure out what's truly going on. It seems like at first they're at a table drafting, but then there's this whole scene behind them. So I thought, well, maybe they're on a porch or something. But then there's this lamp in the corner, which leads you to believe that this is a wall. And so I'm still a bit confused about what's going on in this image. It really disturbs me when I look at it with the other cards because it just doesn't quite work with the deck. And it's not clear to me what's happening. The next card is from the Smith-Waite. This is one of those cards where I had to read to figure out where they were going with the Nine of Wands. I suppose, the idea of setting broken bones so that you can move forward. I'm not a fan of this. It's a little grotesque for my liking, though I've seen much grosser things in tarot cards. So aesthetically a little bit this is off-putting to me, but also it didn't quite make sense, and I had to go and read the guidebook and figure out what they were going for. It was a stretch for me. Another card from the Smith-Waite is the Six of Pentacles. This is a concept or idea that I've seen in other decks. However, to me, it's gross. I don't really care for it. I don't like it. It just doesn't appeal to me at all. I know, this card normally is about the idea of sharing from what we have. In this case, possibly life force. I don't know for sure, but this is an image that always disturbs me. From the Green Witch, these are cards which I had to look up and see what their relation was. This is 15, which is called Nature in the Green Witch. Ordinarily, that would be our double card. I've never thought particularly of nature as being harsh, personally, having grown up on a river. But so I had to do some reading about this card and why they chose to make this number 15. They definitely portrayed, a trap. They've portrayed a bear there. There's dancers in the background. I just don't see this this may look a little devilish, but to me, nature is not what I would tend to associate with the devil. So, also from the Green Witch is the Three of Athames. This is ordinarily your heartbreak card, and we're going to be looking at some of these in a few minutes because most of the decks that attempt to do something different than the Waite-Smith tradition, Smith-Waite tradition, with this card, i.e. the heart with the three swords through it, to me miss the mark, or at least cause confusion, or they're just not aesthetically pleasing. This card in particular, I had to read the book to figure out what was going on in the image to even relate it to bereavement, loss, or heartache. So again, it was more or less about not understanding the imagery that was in the card. This is the Six of Wands from the Starseeker's Tarot. This was a card that to me seemed out of place with the rest of the deck. It seems very specific, right, to witchcraft, to a young witch getting her broom, which none of the other cards to me hit me that way as specifically witch related, and so it seemed a little odd to me. It is a pretty card. It took me by surprise for a second, but I immediately knew what was going on. It just seemed a little out of place in that deck for me. Here's the Two of Pentacles from one of my favorite decks, the Bonestone and Earthflesh. I love this image. However, I had to research the significance of the spider in witchcraft and spirituality to understand why the spider in the web was a symbol for the Two of Pentacles. And I also had to read what was said online at the time, because that was before I got the guidebook when I started working with this image. And now, of course, referring to the guidebook to figure that out. You know, the spider has to make choices about how to weave their web so that it will remain sturdy. So here are some cards that to me are odd, that don't quite work for me because they create confusion. These are from the Green Witch Tarot, the Seven of Pentacles and the Eight of Pentacles. To me, these are the same message, the same image. It just doesn't quite work for me. Both of these could be an Eight of Pentacles. I get that perhaps this one is not near completion. They're still in process. But I think that depicting it this way really causes confusion with the Eight of Pentacles, which is about that hard work and mastery of craft. I get maybe this one's younger and this one's older, but unless you see them side by side, you wouldn't look at this image and immediately go, oh, that's the Seven of Pentacles. To me, without these words, I would have thought this is the Eight of Pentacles. So the next one is probably a little bit of a stretch, but this deck confused me a little bit, the Bonestone and Earthflesh, with these two images. I get that for the Ten of Cups, they were going with overflowing, having an abundance of this element. But to me, this looks much more like an Ace of Cups than a Ten of Cups in a traditional sense. And so it took me a little while to get used to that. But also the use of the Blood Moon, which is not something that I really think much about, I guess, in my own practice and whatnot, as the Ace of Cups. It hit me as a little odd. And I had to study up on this to get the significance of that. So these are cards that for me were a bit confusing until I actually read the guidebooks. So here's some cards that I just don't like for various reasons, aesthetically mostly. The Strongholds in the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. have a lot going on, and one of the things about them is that the wings in the strongholds in particular seem a little odd to me in the way that they're depicted. And then there's also a lot of other things going on in the card. So sometimes it can be a little distracting, like, what is this root? I don't remember what this root is. So then I have to go back and look it up in the guidebook. But I love this deck. In fact, all of these decks are decks I love and that I work with. That's why I notice these cards all the time. So the next card is from the Star Seekers Tarot. This is Three of Swords. Again, this is a card that's going to come up a lot in decks where I feel like the depiction is odd. This card, I think, would be beautiful if there had been more contrast. I think the hands should have been a darker color, a darker skin tone, so that they would stand out more and it'd be readily visible as to what they are. I also think that making the eye iris black rather than a color, gray, blue, yellow, green, whatever, kind of makes the eye look a little bit odd. And I noticed in her other cards where she used eyes, she did color the irises. So I think this card could have been better depicted and would have been a lovely depiction of the Three of Hearts. It's just a little odd because of the colors in the card. From the Bunstone and Earthflash, this is a card, the Page of Wands, that just doesn't resonate with me. I get they were going for fierceness here. I guess that's a little bit too intense energy to me for a page, but also aesthetically, this just isn't a image that I can relate to or that works with for me. Though this is one of my favorite decks, and this is one of the few cards that I have an issue with in it. This Might Hurt Tarot. My problem with this card is not that it's not beautiful and not that it's not meaningful, but the idea here was to remove some religious imagery from the deck. But instead of removing it, they simply replaced it with another religion or mythos. And so that kind of bothered me a little bit. I can work with this, but for me, it's really odd that there's only one card that depicts Egyptian motifs in the entire deck. And that's something that has happened in several decks that I've seen where they've tried to go away from the Christian imagery. They've like added a couple of cards that were based in Egyptian imagery or some other faith, which I think is odd. If you're not going to replace everything, then why replace just one thing? Also from that deck is the Chariot. This was the one card that immediately I was like, what the heck are they doing? For me, I just think this is dangerous as soon as I see it. I get that they're going for, forward motion. This is one of the shortcomings, I think, of this deck, replacing all of the horses with motorcycles. I don't think that was necessary. I think there are horses in modern day society. But this card in particular really disturbed me because of this woman standing on the back of two motorcycles. Obviously, these cannot be moving. This is unrealistic as a depiction of a chariot moving. I just can't with this card. So I have a few more cards here from the Spirit Keepers Tarot, but most of these are limited to the Vitruvian edition where there were some reworks. But I've never really related to the Keeper. It's the only Fool that has a person's image in it. And for this deck, she actually did change the image of the woman. Because people complained in the first edition that the woman looked too much like her, when in fact it was her grandmother. So it's just a card that I haven't been able to connect with or relate to, I think because of the image of a person in it, while the other Fools did not have a person in it. But it's a beautiful card. I love what she did there in the Vitruvian. The Emperor is a card that in the first edition, I thought was a great image, although it was a little busy. She decided to try to make it a little less busy by redrawing it. But to me, this image artistically doesn't blend with the other artwork in the deck. It's very bold and harsh to me compared with the way she drew many of the other images. And I found that to be true of several of the cards that were redone for this Vitruvian edition. They stand out apart from the cards that were in the first edition, to me at least. The shining ones, or the knights, in the Vitruvian edition, she replaced with horses, winged horses, and that was not a move that I really appreciated. I liked that there were angels in all of the courts in the first deck. And while the knights probably needed some tweaking, I think this was a completely different direction. It's a completely different card for me. But it's a beautiful image. It just was, I preferred the first edition. Again, the Three of Hearts, and that's what we're going to be talking about over the next 5 cards. That's going to be the end of our discussion today, because this is a card I feel like it's hard to get a good depiction of. I'm not a huge fan of realistic heart portrayals. They tend to gross me out, or they either are poorly done or done too well, and I can't appreciate them. This particular deck is about Isis and Horus and the death and birth involved with their child, and it actually is a great card as far as meaning, but aesthetically for me it doesn't appeal because of that Egyptian mythos that's worked into there, and I'll say because of that realistic heart. It's just not something that I like, but I work with them. So some cards that I love the way they were done. We have here the Lightseer's Tarot. I thought this was a gorgeous depiction. You get the pain, the agony, the bereavement, and it's a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing image, at least to me. The Three of Swords from the Lost Hollow Tarot is also one of my favorites. Very much reminiscent of the Waite-Smith or Smith-Waite tradition, except they've integrated the addition of the rose there, and you can see the rose is falling apart as the swords pierce it. It's a gorgeous image. I really love it. Probably my all-time favorite one. Oddly enough, I just said I hate realistic depictions of hearts, but for some reason, this depiction of a heart I find beautiful. And this is from the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot, the deck I'm working with this week in my weekly reading. And I love it. It's a take on the Smith-Waite tradition, using a realistic heart, but for some reason he was able to artistically portray it in a way that it didn't creep me out. So one of my favorites, however, not my all-time favorite. My all-time favorite, Three of Swords, a card that typically I just can't relate to in most decks that switch it up, is from the Goblin Tarot, and I've shared this before, but this was the card that actually helped me personally connect with the Three of Swords. This goblin has just lost his beloved dog, and if you've worked with this deck or seen this deck, this dog appears throughout the entire deck. And so at this point where the dog dies, it is more significant because this is a lifelong companion who has passed. Obviously, endings are a big part of the Three of Swords, bereavement and loss. And so for me, I connected with this because this is an experience that I've had. I've lost a dog and wept over them. And whereas I have not had the kind of romantic relationships or long-term commitments that many people seem to go through again and again and again. So this really connected for me, the Three of Swords, to me personally in my life. And I think that's one thing about the tarot, is that if we can relate to the cards personally, and significantly, then we understand their meaning better, right? And that we learn from them and we grow from them. And so for me, this was that card for the Three of Swords. I appreciate everyone's tuning in and listening to me chat about this. I know I'm posting it a little later than I had suggested. However, if you would like to respond with some cards that just don't work for you or that are odd, and if you have one like I do, the Three of Swords, that's frequently odd or off index for you, please do share that. I am using the hashtag cards that don't work, specifically cards that don't work for me. I'll see you next time. Until then, good journeys.